Today we will be building the new LEGO Batman Arkham Asylum. This is set number 76300. Comes with 2,953 pieces and retails in the US for $299.99. This is a new set. I'm really looking forward to building this, so let's get started. So this is LEGO set 76300, the LEGO Arkham Asylum. This set comes with 2,953 pieces and retails in the US for $299.99. There's a lot of I was actually really interested in this set simply because it builds like a modular. There are 3 floors to this building, and I'm a big Batman fan, so I figured this would be a lot of fun to pick up. First, there are a lot of minifigures in this set. As you can see, I'll get to them in a minute, but there are a lot of minifigures in this set, including most of them from the Batman series, all with their individual accessories. Because Arkham Asylum ambulance, or sorry, not an ambulance, transport vehicle. It includes a flatbed that you simply slide back into the back of the truck here. And then that's it. There's no this set. You can pull the tops off to see inside the set, but that's really about it. There are a couple of you can see a couple of stun guns here, but this truck's pretty straightforward. It's the first thing you build. It's a nice little accessory, but I'll also get to the stickers here as well in a few minutes. The set itself is really well designed. I wasn't too familiar with how this was originally from the original comic set. But there are 3 floors, so obviously the entrance is really nice here. I like how they have this. This is all one piece. You just have to put the tiles on and kind of build it out. And again, there's quite a few stickers in this set. But there's some really cool. There's a really nice statue up top here in the front of the building, and then kind of going around the sides. You can see the gates are on the sides, and then going to the back. There's no windows in the back. There's a trash can down here that does actually pull. It's interesting. These actually pull open the inner doors of the cells. There's a little opening here, like an escape pod here, as you can see, or window that's broken. And then up at the top here, there's a lot of cool little accessories. Also, 3 minifigures that do come off Batman, the Penguin, and then this one here. But yeah, I do like the way it's designed. I think it's a really cool set. Definitely a good display piece, and you can integrate it with other modulars as well. There's a few spots on either side of this. Since it is technically kind of a corner piece, it really doesn't face forward diagonally, unfortunately, which is kind of the second floor. Again, like I said, it does have the doors for the cells that do open, and then you close in here. And then also in here, there's a little office in here, and then there's a little. There aren't any stairwells. That was one thing I noticed about this too. There's no stairwells up to the second floors here, but there's a little office and a water cooler in here. And over again, there's the doors do open here for the inner cells, and then there's the entranceway to the. There's a camera in here, and then here on the other side, there is actually a door for the like the high security facility for high profile. 2 books in this set to build 3,000 pieces. It gets right into the front. So the book is actually really interesting. It does talk about, the set itself as well as the background in the Batman series. And then it does get into, again, talks about a little information from the design team. And then there's actually a few pages broken out here for each of the minifigures. So there's Batman and Robin. There's Batwoman. So 3 main characters, and there's the Joker, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, and Catwoman. And then there is one more page here where it talks about the other ones. There's a little inmate profiles for Killer Croc, Mr. Freeze, the Riddler, Scarecrow, Bane, and then the Penguin as well. So $300. It is. I mean, it's on par with what the cost of the pieces is, just a little over 10 cents a piece, which I think is pretty fair. There are a lot of minifigures. However, there are a lot of stickers on this set. I know some people kind of complained about that, especially with this one, but there's 2 sticker sheets. It wasn't too bad, but again, I mean, it's going to take you a while to build this, so it's not like it was eating up all your time. They're pretty large stickers for the most part up here, around in front, down the sides here to purchase. And if you're into either LEGO Batman, you're a fan of Batman, LEGO comics, whatever, but especially if you're a fan of modulars, this is definitely one to pick up. You'll enjoy building this, especially the way it's designed as far as its unique corner style build. I think that was something that I did enjoy building. It wasn't just standard, four on four, 10 by 10, like we've seen with other modulars. And I think this would definitely fit pretty well in any Lego city for the most part. And there's a lot of cool little features, a lot of things, that are reflective of the actual. So I hope you enjoyed this build. And again, if you did, I'd appreciate you clicking on like and subscribe. And once again, I appreciate your support and thanks for watching.